So we have that news on Mitt Romney. In the meantime, we begin with a potential turning point in the Republican race for president. Welcome to Happening Now, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee.
And I'm John Scott. Donald Trump using his Super Tuesday wins to begin what seems to be a new phase in his campaign. Listen. After winning 7 states, the Republican frontrunner holding a news conference in Florida. An unexpected move since he usually holds rallies filled with screaming supporters. The billionaire businessman taking the podium, positioning himself as the man who can bring the splintered Republican Party together.
There's much less enthusiasm for the Democrats. So, look, I'm a unifier. I know people are going to find that a little bit hard to believe, but believe me, I am a unifier. Once we get all of this finished, I'm going to go after one person. That's Hillary Clinton, on the assumption she's allowed to run, which is a big assumption. I don't know that she's going to be allowed to run. And I think that's frankly going to be an easy race. You see the polls. I beat Hillary in many polls. I know one thing. I don't think Marco is going to be able to beat her. I don't think, in all fairness, I think Ted's going to have a very hard time. But Ted at least has a shot because at least he's won a little bit. So I just tell you this. We are going to be a much finer party, we're going to be a unified party. I mean, to be honest with you. And we are going to be a much bigger party, and you can see that happening. We're going to be a much bigger party. Our party is expanding.
Our Super Tuesday coverage team, Megyn Kelly and Bret Baier, were watching that news conference during live coverage last night. They say it could be a sign of things to come.
Donald Trump using this night in a news conference that was, Megyn, a different environment. It was a different look, and frankly, it kind of looked presidential, and that's probably what he was trying to do.
Not only that, but holding himself out there, striking a reasonable tone. He wasn't full of the normal bombast. There were a few jabs, but, you know, sounding presidential, which sort of will help some of his detractors see him in a different light, perhaps, and focusing most of his ire on Hillary Clinton. I thought it was interesting where he said, I'm a unifier. He said, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm a unifier. Once we get all of this finished, I'm going to go after one person, Hillary Rodham Clinton, if she's allowed to run. But that is the one thing that the Republican Party as a whole wants to hear.
Let's bring in our political panel. Michael Warren, staff writer for the Weekly Standard. Shira Center, political editor of the Boston Globe. Shira, is this the kinder, gentler Donald Trump?
You know, it might have been a preview of the general election, which in many ways we could say started last night. I mean, you had both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton take questions for reporters. In Hillary Clinton's case, it was the first time in some 85 days that she had a press conference, and you saw them both turn their attacks on each other. I mean, this is really what the general election could look like between those two. But one thing about Donald Trump, I'll be interested to see if he softens his tone quite a bit. Usually when candidates move from the primary to the general election, they'll start emphasizing their more moderate positions. Well, Donald Trump is anything but a traditional candidate in this case, but he has in the past had some moderate positions, so I wonder if he'll go back to those. He's certainly shown he's not afraid to change his mind on key issues.
Michael, you know, there was this appeal from Donald Trump. He says, I'm going to be a unifier. Well, there are so many in the Republican Party who are saying, let's unite behind anybody but Donald Trump. Is he trying to preempt that kind of fervor?
Yes, he is, and he's going to have, I think, a very difficult time of preempting that. He's got a problem, I think, Donald Trump does, which is that a big chunk of the party doesn't like him and doesn't want to vote for him and doesn't want to support him. How big that group is by the end of this whole process, we don't really know. But I think the relative strength of Ted Cruz, for instance, in those Super Tuesday states yesterday, Donald Trump actually didn't do as well as he could have in the delegate race. I do think there's some hope if you're a John Kasich or Marco Rubio supporter on March 15th that maybe they can come up in the delegate race if they win in their respective states. And in that case, you really do have a more divided party than ever. And I think Donald Trump is maybe kidding himself or trying to kid the rest of us and thinking that he's going to be uniting the party anytime soon. It looks more divided, as this recent announcement that Mitt Romney is going to speak tomorrow, more divided than ever.
A couple of former presidential contenders from the Republican side, Mike Huckabee and Herman Cain, were on Fox and Friends this morning giving their view of Donald Trump. Listen to this.
I just believe that at some point we need to recognize if you want to oppose Donald Trump, do it. But don't pretend that somehow that all these voters who have gone out and voted for him are stupid. They're not stupid. I'll tell you what they are. They're angry, and they're angry at the very establishment who is going nuts because Donald Trump is doing so well, and they don't get it, that they're the problem.
My message to them is quite simply, get over it. I mean, Donald Trump I think he made some very good comments last night during his acceptance speech of when he was basically talking. The establishment needs to get over it.
Shira, is Donald Trump winning fans, you know, among even former presidential contenders?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. We've seen the percentages go up as the candidates drop out. Republicans initially thought he had this ceiling of 35% of the party, which is what he got in the New Hampshire primary, for example. But as more candidates drop out, his ceiling is growing. The Trump base continues to grow. My question is, there's a certain percentage of Republican voter out there who will never vote for Donald Trump. Maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 30%, maybe it's even as high as 40%. But that percentage, what are they going to do in November? I think they'll either vote for a third-party candidate or they're not going to show up at all in the polls. And in America, where the country is split politically, that will damage him in November. So when Trump says he's a unifier, I mean, he better be hoping he is a unifier, because there will be part of the party he will need, Republican Party, not talking about independent voters, Republican Party he will need to win over to have a shot in November, even if Hillary Clinton is very politically damaged.
According to the Fox News exit polls, the one thing, or one of the largest things driving voters to the polls, is anger with the federal government, Michael. If you look at the numbers, in Texas, 48% say they are angry with the federal government, 47% in Tennessee, 46% in Georgia, 43% in Oklahoma. A lot of those voters also said they want an outsider in government. So Donald Trump kind of seems to encapsulate that for them, doesn't he?
Absolutely he does. This is, I think, something that he's been able to ride all the way to leading the delegates, leading in the states won. The problem, I think, for Republicans is that they haven't made a good case, really only in the last week or so. Those anti-Trump Republicans, that Donald Trump can't deliver and won't deliver on the promises he's giving to shake things up, to come in it from an outsider perspective. If you listen to a lot of the things that Donald Trump promised, you know, yesterday in that press conference, he's going to bring back American jobs, jobs to America, you know, from Apple or whatever. The President of the United States has no ability to do that. So I do think that, again, Donald Trump has a problem here, which is convincing those Republicans who think that he's actually misleading people about who he is and what he can do, and that ultimately it will be an existential threat to the conservative movement, which really, I think, gives the Republican Party, you know, its sort of base in this country. I think we're really headed toward a major split, no matter what happens, if Donald Trump continues to march to the nomination. If he can't wrap it up and get a majority of those delegates.
More on that, Shira, from the Fox News exit polls. They found that a lot of Republicans are going to be dissatisfied if Donald Trump wins the nomination. Virginia, 54% said they'd be dissatisfied if he wins. Same number in Texas, 50% in Arkansas, 45% in Georgia. So if he does want to be a unifier, Shira, he has a lot of unifying to do.
He does. And some of those people come the convention in this summer, you know, assuming it's not contested or there isn't any drama like that. Some of those people are just plain going to get over it. They're going to see him as the Republican nominee. They're going to see him better than Hillary Clinton, as long as there's no third-party option. And they're just going to hold their nose and they're going to vote for Donald Trump.
Or they're not going to vote.
Or they're not going to vote, right. I mean, as I said earlier, you could be looking at, you know, 5%, 10%, 15, 20% of the Republican Party who's just going to stay home because they don't want to vote for Donald Trump. And that is a problem in a general election. And frankly, leaves a whole lot of room. If I'm Michael Bloomberg, I'm considering to think about this for the next month and to see what his path could be.
We talked about him in our first hour today. Shira Center and Michael Warren, thank you.